Well, good afternoon and welcome to everybody on such a beautiful day and such a beautiful location. We are incredibly lucky. It's my opportunity to welcome you on behalf of TCCI, and I'd like to recognise the presence of Lord Mayor of Hobart, Alderman Damon Thomas, and Alderman Sue Hickey of the Hobart City Council. I've got the pleasant task of emceeing the proceedings today, and in a moment I'll ask Jason Falchier, ANZ District Executive Tasmania, to open proceedings. ANZ are our official sponsors for the lunch today. I'll invite Jason to say a few words. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Neil. I appreciate the opportunity to say a couple of words today before we get our entrepreneurs, Lindsay and Frank, up to entertain us and tell us some stories about their business journey. But I just wanted to say thank you to TCCI for organising this function and bringing such significant members of the Australian business community to Tasmania. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to listen and learn and observe the entrepreneurship that they have pioneered over the many years. And I also would encourage the TCCI to continue a series of these events, and in particular to include people from the rest of Australia, the mainland, also internationally, but also our Tasmanian entrepreneurs, so that we can hear more about their story. It certainly does something in my mind, and it encourages us to be confident about the future, and hopefully that will come through the sessions that we hear from both Frank and Lindsay today. Picking up the papers, we quite often get stuck in the doom and gloom of the current times. But speaking to my clients, and I do want to acknowledge the clients here today that we have and those that aren't with us, we're certainly open for business and keen to hear more from you and do that in the future. But with the clients that we have, in particular ones around our tables today, we hear about the challenges that they face, but more importantly, the optimism and confidence that they are embracing the future with, and how not staying still and not changing is a recipe for disaster, but continuing to innovate and invest and think about the future is ultimately the important success ingredient that we see with our business clients, and we really appreciate the opportunity to support them. Certainly at ANZ, across all areas of our business, including Asanda and asset finance, retail, business bank and agribusiness, we are enjoying good times in Tasmania, and happy to say that. Our business continues to grow, and it's thank you to a lot of the people in this room and our clients across Tassie. We are certainly optimistic for the future, and certainly are keen to encourage everyone in Tasmania to speak to us where they can. So I suppose in closing, just want to again, declare proceedings open and thank TCCI for bringing this event together. Certainly a fantastic location showcasing what is possible in Tasmania today. When you see the sunshine here at Mona and Marilla, it certainly gives us confidence that people that are out there doing great things can achieve greatness in Tasmania, as we've seen through our business community, and look forward to Lindsay and Frank's speech today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, and thank you again to ANZ. It's wonderful to have sponsors like them. Without them, these events are very difficult to carry off. ANZ's been a presence in Tasmania for very many years. I happen to have a passbook at home from one of my forebears with an ANZ bank book of 1836. So next time I come looking for money, I hope you'll remember the longevity of the relationship. On my list here it says that I'm now to introduce Frank Costa. While I'd love to do it, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to do it for reasons that will, excuse me, become immediately obvious. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members and guests. I assume Neil was referring to the reason why I was asked to do this very brief introduction was because I'm probably the only person in this room that's actually worked for Frank Costa. If I'm incorrect, please put your hand up. But I had the opportunity to work with Frank, and that was in Geelong where Frank was born. And in the early 50s, he and his family took over the vegetable operations and commenced wholesaling and built the business up as what is today, with Frank at the helm as Chief Executive and Chairman. You'll be aware that Frank has got a very large operation, largest private-owned business so far as packing, marketing, distributing and exporting of fresh fruit and vegetables and grains in the Southern Hemisphere. We talk large, we're probably talking of a turnover at least $1 billion. They have over 8,000 employees and 1,500 acres of planted farms, which I'm sure Frank will refer to in his discussion, the fact that he is now a substantial operator of blueberries in the northern part of the state. You'll be aware that Frank has had many mutual awards, and probably the one that we're all aware of is that in 1998 Frank was elected as president of the Geelong Football Club, and he resigned that position last year, but you'll be aware of his significant success within that organisation. Underwent massive development into premierships, and the rest of Frank's CV continues to read like that, including a high level of community involvements as well as his business involvements. And from my knowledge, I think it'd be fair to say that Frank is someone who has always been innovative, tremendous drive, very resolute. In other words, he's had the strength not to accept what people say. I believe it should be done a different way. Determination, tough and hard, I can attest to that. One who's used to overcoming hurdles and roadblocks, and with a number of daughters and 20 grandchildren, and I'm not sure about the great-grandchildren yet. Frank has had to work very hard for his life to afford such a family. But importantly, Frank started as a small businessman, which is what is synonymous in Australia with people getting out and giving things a go and enduring the hardships and being successful. We should always recognise that. And whilst you may be a small businessman wondering where your future is, then it's the likes of Frank that give you a very good guide. Frank started off with his version of selling apples, and we all know that there's another brand of apples around, but I think, Frank, we thank you very much for everything you've done for Australia, what you'll be doing for Tasmania, your continuing involvement, and whilst a lot of people might have iPhones and iPads, I think we've all got an iCosta. Thank you, Frank.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. Can everybody hear me around the room? Good. Well, I suppose, firstly, it was a pleasure to say yes when asked to come down with Lindsay to speak today and say a few things about how we see the needs to be making sure Tasmania becomes a very strong state in its own right. How we can see through some of our experiences, perhaps some thoughts that can be passed on that might be handy and helpful down here. And if I looked, I suppose, at the business I'm involved in, Costa's, the fresh fruit and vegetable operation, if I looked at the footy club that I love dearly, I've looked at the city of Greater Geelong where I was born and grew up and I'm most passionate about, and I think of what's happened in trying to make each of those three organisations or separate entities strong, healthy, and something that we can all feel very proud to be part of. Pretty much the same, I suppose, principles or rules apply right through. So if I start with the family business, it was getting my younger brothers to come on board with me when I saw an opportunity, an idea, taking over a small fruit shop from my parents, seeing an opportunity to bring a wholesale activity into Geelong and supply all the smaller fruit shops, restaurants, schools, hospitals and what have you, and from there build what I thought would be the best wholesale business in Geelong, and then the ambition growing to be the best in Victoria and then the best in Australia, sort of thing. And it's great to have those ambitions, but I soon realised as I went along the road that the only way you can achieve these things if you want to continue to grow is through people, and through getting the best people, really good people, onto your team, and making sure that your organisation has got such strong values laced right through it that those people who could get a job anywhere else and get the same money anywhere else because of their ability find it's very rewarding to stay within that organisation. And that's how we sort of are able to build up Costas. And I'll go a bit further in that in a minute, but I'll just relate now back to the football club. It was a similar situation. The football club was such an important part of Geelong going forward. We're the only regional city in Australia to have a team in the biggest sporting competition in the country. However, that was in a very perilous state going back to 1998. And again, when the current president, Ron Hovey, was going to step down and call a spill of the board because they couldn't get the situation turned around, and he asked me if I'd set up a board and have a go at it, I knew through my experience in building Costas that we had to get the very best people to do so. We had to get the right people to come on the board, people who had the skills necessary that were complementary to the challenge, but the chemistry to work together as people and the values within themselves to be able to start to develop a real healthy culture in the organisation. And then to chase the very best CEO in the country, because you've got to have really good leadership. And when I asked a couple of friends of mine who were AFL, one was a commissioner and one was the CEO of the AFL, who the best sports administrator in Australia was, they told me, but said you'd never get him because he's doing so well over in Perth. That was a chap named Brian Cook. But we had to get him, and we did get him. And it was only through getting those sort of people around, because when we got Brian Cook, who was a man not just of great ability at sports administration, but with really strong values, you start to attract other people with similar values into the organisation. And the more people you get of high quality that have got both ability and the right character, the easier it starts to come to get the whole show running properly. So then you come back to our city, Geelong, and we've been through a terrible stage in recent times, very recent times. You would have all heard in Tasmania of the Pyramid Building Society, and when it went down in 1990, it was sort of like an earthquake in Geelong. It just shattered the whole region. 1 in every 3 people had money tied up in Pyramid and lost it. We had suicides and foreclosures on homes and what have you all through the place. And Geelong became a very, very depressed place. And by the mid-90s, about 94, 95, youth unemployment was 40%. The brighter kids, when they were leaving school, were going to Melbourne or Sydney or somewhere else. The not so ambitious kids were just going straight on the dole and hanging around the mall. And it was pretty chronic. And again, some good people helped Geelong. Jeff Kennett, who was Premier of Victoria at the time in the mid-90s, he injected $30 million into our city council's coffers and told them to get off their backside and do something about that wonderful north-facing bay that we had that had been sitting there for over 50 years neglected. And I remember he really got stuck into the council for not moving quick enough. And that activated something to put a bit of pride back into the town, to build up our bayfront. It's a beautiful area now, if you ever visit Geelong and have a look at it. The other one that really happened, the second catalyst that turned Geelong around, was a very creative, visionary Vice-Chancellor of Deakin University named John Hay. Saw all these old wool stores, magnificent old buildings, but they'd been sitting empty for 30 years, right down on our waterfront, and decided that he could approach government, get the funding, and turn them into a live centre of education in Geelong. And he did that. And so between Deakin taking over the old buildings that made us look like a mausoleum, the council finally getting activated into doing something about brightening up the bayfront, things started to happen. Then in 98, when we got stuck into the football club and started to be successful as we went through the early 2000s, the pride started to come back into the city. Everybody started to walk a little bit taller, a little bit straighter, and our employment started to improve. And we're now currently below 5%. I think we're lower than the state average, actually, right through. I don't think there's any other area any better than ours now. But you can't rest on your laurels. So they know they've still got a lot to do. But what we're seeing happen in Geelong now, and this can happen in Tasmania very easily, is that organisations like the Committee for Geelong, which got started and is doing a great job there, G21, which ties in the 5 locations around Geelong, that's the City of Greater Geelong, the City Council and Deakin University have come together to try and really promote activity that's healthy and strong and growing. And the CBD is the one that's under real microscopic view at the moment. And Deakin University have set up a challenge with the city to put a plan together to turn our city into the greatest city in Australia for its size. And they got 60 of the top architects around Australia into a competition that all have put in their sixpenneth as to what it should look like, what should happen to it. They'll have to raise an awful lot of money, but they will do it, and it will happen. Just because we've got good people that care about it, making sure some good things do occur. And I remember just how important the footy club was to Geelong when I was a kid. When I was 11, 12, I sold heralds on the T&G corner. If Geelong won, I couldn't hardly carry the amount of heralds and sporting globes, that was a pink paper that heralded the sport, on a Saturday afternoon after the game, Saturday evening, back to my corner and sell every one of them. When Geelong lost, I'd get less than half those papers and take most of them back because nobody wanted to read about it when we lost, but everybody wanted to read about it when we won. And you've got to have winners wherever it is. So if I come back to Tasmania and use some of those examples that I've seen what good people can do, and people with vision and drive and working together for a common cause, I see in Tasmania real opportunities. Like Geelong, you're possibly going to lose some industries. And we're a great manufacturing town. We're not now. Ford are much smaller and reducing all the time. Shell has got smaller. Alcoa have got a lot smaller. We have great wool stores in Geelong, factories making clothing like blankets and all sorts of things. We had terrific ordinary clothing manufacturers, shoe manufacturers. They're all gone. They've all gone to Asia. There's one survivor though, by G. Godfrey Hurst, which is a woolen mill in Geelong, would employ 2,500 people, defied all the odds. And they're still going very strongly. So you can even, with the right leadership, you can make something happen. However, if you come back to it, we lost a lot of things and we were doing nothing about it until the late 90s, mid-1990s to late 1990s. Then we started to look at what we could do. So through Deakin's support, Gordon Institute got off their backside. We've got very good schools right through, and our education is becoming a bigger and bigger part of Geelong. And it's the equal biggest employer in Geelong now is education. Health was another big one. And again, Deakin were helped there when they took on the medical school. And they've got 520 medical students being trained as doctors now. Last year's graduation of 130 doctors. Only between 20 and 30 went to Melbourne. Most of them stayed Geelong and rural Victoria, which we were desperate for doctors in rural Victoria. So not only are we helping Geelong, but we're helping country Victoria as well. So as we've looked at other areas to employ people, we worked very, very hard on our tourism. And now the Great Ocean Road, which is at Geelong's back door running around the coast, heading west, is the #1 visitor tourist attraction in Victoria. Provides a lot of support for all of our B&Bs, hotels, restaurants, shops, all down around the coast. It's been fantastic. So tourism now is going well for Geelong. Well, Tassie, what a great place. Like when we flew in here today, how beautiful is this? This setting here, when you look around, the more people you could bring into the place, the better off you'd be. So if I look at what's helped Geelong, footy, #1. We'd be in absolute diabolical trouble without our football team in that town. You guys should have a football club of your own here. Not a couple of Melbourne clubs coming down and playing a few games, but your own football team should be here. I remember Jim Bacon was passionate about it when I came down here years ago. Everybody said you haven't got enough corporate strength in Tasmania to support a club, and I think that's just bunkum. If the government gives you some support, and they promised they would, and I still believe they would, you put enough pressure on the AFL, sooner or later, the AFL are going to need to have a team down here. They want to be truly national. They've done the right thing by starting 2 more clubs, one in West Sydney and one up on the Gold Coast, because you need 2 clubs in each of those states playing football every weekend up there to try and get on top of the rugby influence that's in those 2 states. But this is an AFL state. You've got 500,000 people, most of them passionate. We've got many Geelong supporters here. Got one or two. Here we have got a few, see? And I'll bet you got Collingwood and Essendon. Imagine if you had a Tasmanian team. And I reckon sooner or later, Victoria's not going to be able to hold 10 clubs in an 18-club competition. So if you're putting the right pressure on and you've got a team down here, the lift in tourism would be sensational, because most of the clubs in the team now are getting up to 40, 50,000 members. So every time a team's playing in Tassie, you'd have thousands of people flying down to watch their team play, spending 3, 4, 5 days in Tassie, helping hotels, restaurants, shops, and whatever prosper. So that's a thing you should be really pushing very hard for, is footy. Education, which has helped Geelong. I'm looking at what's really helped Geelong, so I'm not trying to invent the wheel. This is what's just happened in recent times. Education, if you would get behind your university down here and try and make Hobart a university city, and if you look at some university cities around the world, you'll get the example of what they have done for their city. It could be a huge thing. Where I told you those wool stores were, a lady by the name of Jane Den Hollander, who is our Vice-Chancellor now, is working very hard within 5 years to have 10,000 students actually operating at the wool store campus on our bayfront. At the same time, out at Warren Ponds, which is only on the other side of town, she intends to have 10,000 students operating daily out there as well. Well, imagine what those 20,000 students living in and studying in Geelong will do for our economy. It'll be enormous. So you could get that happening here too, but you'd have to get right behind the university, get right behind helping them get government support to continue to develop, perhaps bring in 1 or 2 new subjects here, like they did with the medical school and the School of Architecture at Deakin in Geelong, and you'd see enormous potential turning into reality here. So as I look at Geelong, as I said again, we went outside what we used to be. We're a manufacturing town to doing other things. Tourism is strong now. Education is strong. Health is really strong. And now we've really got stuck into the IT side of the world and doing things down there. And Deakin University are helping by putting on really strong courses to attract people down there and help organisations by partnering with them in building up their businesses. So it's within your own hands to make sure that if you lose some of the industries I've been hearing about going out here, and your unemployment is really threatened to going up through the roof, get into it right now. Don't let it happen. I was just talking before to James Neville Smith, who has just bought back part of their business here. And since Christmas, when they just started, they've been building up their business, and they've got 58 employees there now from ZAP. Well, maybe there's a lot can still be done in the timber industry if you want to make it happen. Maybe it can be done in such a sustainable way that it's not going to hurt the ecology at all. So the environment's not going to be affected negatively, but you can really promote what Mother Nature's given you here, an industry that can employ a lot of people and bring in dollars for Tasmania. And with our own industry, where I come from, we've found that we can grow berries in Tasmania late, the latest time of the year. You're the furthest south landmass in Australia. And in all the fruits that we grow, you start up north early, that's where the season first starts, and you come down north to south as the year progresses. And the further south you go is the latest product that comes. Well, we grow blueberries, blackberries and raspberries up around Devonport, just out there, Sulphur Creek, and about 2 other areas around there. And we found they're going so well that we're expanding that acreage as quickly as we possibly can. Now, I know there are cherry growers growing late cherries down here that do really well, and they're the best cherries on the market when they come into season. That can be expanded. And there are other fruits. There'd be apricots, there'd be other sorts of stone fruits that could grow down here. You want things that have got high value, not just, that's why I'm talking fruits rather than vegetables, that can bring real dollars in, that can afford the freight from Tasmania across to the mainland. But they can be grown. So in my industry, it's fresh produce. I've seen how it can happen here. In talking to James Neville Smith, timber's got an enormous future, and it can be done in a controlled way that doesn't affect the sustainability of our environment. So all those sorts of opportunities you've got that are here now can be built on. You don't have to try and bring in unbelievable things that have never been in Tasmania before. You can build on what Mother Nature's given you. So I think that's pretty much what I needed to say. Our business has not been the easiest thing in the world to grow from where it was to where it is today. But I found that if I could get good, committed people that had the right values, that I could build a culture in our company that was one of honesty and integrity, where people knew that if they worked jolly hard together, we'd all share in the rewards. It's amazing how much easier it gets. Same with our footy club, the same now with our city of Geelong. So I reckon Tasmania's got a hell of a great future, personally. It's just how much you want it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. Humble and straightforward words. Very nice to hear. We will offer opportunity for questions after Lindsay has spoken, and now it's my pleasure to introduce Lindsay Fox, Companion of the Order of Australia. We all know Lindsay as founder of Fox Transport, but I've got a list of other activities and achievements here that indicates just what he's done for himself, for his state and for his country. But before I go into that, there are two stories I want to relate. One is that I think it indicates that Lindsay is nothing if not bold, and I understand that he asked his first wife for a loan to buy his first truck. I don't know whether that's true, Lindsay, but if it is, a bold move. And the second story relates to something that I remember very well, but he won't, when I found myself on the other side of a tennis net from Lindsay about 30 or 40 years ago, when we were probably both a little bit fitter. And it was clearly demonstrated to me that Lindsay had tenacity and aggression to spare. So well, I think I'll have to say that he won that game that day. I couldn't claim to have won, but anyway, I certainly did become very well aware of the energy and commitment that was needed to do what he's done. Lindsay, as I say, is founder of the Fox Group, but a whole host of other activities and achievements that he has been involved in or is involved in. He's the patron of AsiaLink. He's been a non-executive director of Premier Investments, an honorary board member of the Committee of Melbourne, a former director of Coles Myer, a director of Eastern Airlines in the USA and Continental Airlines in the USA, patron-in-chief of the Royal Australian Army Transport Museum Committee, board member of the Intermodal Transportation Institute at the University of Denver, awarded the Companion of the Order of Australia in 2008, previously awarded the Officer of the Order of Australia in 1992. In 2010, Victoria University admitted Lindsay to the degree of Doctor of the University Honoris Causa. I'm not quite sure what that is, but maybe Lindsay will let us know. In 2011, he was awarded the Australia Gold Medal for Distinguished Community Service, Philanthropy and Commerce. And very importantly, between September 1992 and 1993, Lindsay Fox and Bill Kelty, employer and employee representatives, introduced a national campaign called Work for Australia. The end result of that was commitment by employers to create over 60,000 jobs, and 60,000 jobs were pledged through the efforts of Lindsay and Bill, who were then awarded the Award of Victorians of the Year by the Sunday Age. I have great pleasure in introducing Lindsay Fox. Thank you.
Seeing the ANZ are paying for our lunch, I'll give them a plug first. About 35 years ago, a man called Rex William Davidson was really the guy that ran the bank in Victoria. Nobody knew the chief executive, but they all knew Rex William Davidson. Rex became a personal friend, which is something that seems to be lacking in business today, but became a personal friend. And on one occasion he rang me up about 4 o'clock one Friday afternoon. He said, "Lindsay, this is 40 odd years ago. Paula's account is $30,000 overdrawn." I said, "No worries, Rex, I'll come in and fix it up Monday morning." Left it at that. walked in the back door at home while my wife was preparing dinner in the kitchen. I said, "How the shit did you get 30 grand overdrawn?" She looked at me squarely between the eyes and said, "You just don't put it in fast enough." Now, the worst part of that story is it's the truth. We have never had an issue on money since that occasion. One of the other stories that we just heard was about tennis. Tennis, I won the Pro-Am down at Portsea some 20 years ago. And the secret of being able to play good tennis is to have a good partner. It was a doubles situation. I carried a bloke called Frank Sedgman all the way through to win. This year I've spent, I think, 6 trips coming down to Tasmania with both Bill Kelty and Simon Crean. Simon is a great politician, a great Australian, and probably the only one, in my opinion, that I consider as a statesman in federal government. And I am apolitical. I don't barrack for Labor, I don't barrack for Liberal. I barrack for individuals that will put Australia in number 1 spot before anything else. And that's one of the biggest things that we currently lack today. But on coming down to here, we've seen some of the fantastic opportunities that exist, particularly in the food industry. But the real issue is, in my opinion, Tasmania is at the crossroads. You have companies like BHP, Rio, reviewing what they're doing going into the future, and their operations in Tasmania are the equivalent of 1 fingernail on my 300-pound body. So they can afford to lose the fingernail and not have any impact on the organisation. So there's 2. If the third one comes up and the pulp mill doesn't go ahead over here, you'll have a situation where you could have up to 30% unemployment in Tasmania. That's if the 3 of them go astray. And you've got to help make sure that they don't go astray. When Kelty and I, with Simon Crean, and we were known as the KFC, people used to think it was Kentucky Fried Chicken, but it was Kelty, Fox and Crean. We went all over Australia. And the real secret was the way various communities responded to talking and making the true impact of what would happen to their community and to their families if they failed to do something about it. So a typical day would be I'd go into the ACTU in Swanson Street, preferably in a Rolls Royce. Bill Kelty would get in the front seat and lower himself as low as he could in the seat. I'd get the lever and bring him straight back up again. But off we went on this occasion. We went to Ballarat. We were met by the local community, the business community, and they pledged that they'd get 200 jobs for the youth within their community. We went on to Shepparton, and Shepparton was having a tough time. It was like being in a mortuary when we spoke to the local people. And while we were doing all of these things, we had a band of media following us, the local radio stations, the local TV stations, the local newspapers. And not a commitment was made. In fact, there was hardly a word coming off the floor. We went on to Wangaratta, and at Wangaratta they pledged 350 jobs for the people of their community. 3 or 4 days passed, and all the media coverage of the story about the 3 communities we went to, and not a thing out of Shepparton. A phone call came one day advising us that these guys were from Shepparton. They apologised and said, "We're sorry about what happened the other day, but we are a proud town. We're doing it tough, but we're not down and out. And it's our intention to pledge 20 jobs. We highlighted the fact that if they don't do something with their own community, their kids would go, the community would dissipate, and they're the only ones that could make an impact to make these things happen. So the period of time went by, 2-3 months, and the scores came in at the end of that period. Ballarat finished up with about 300 jobs. Wangaratta finished up with about 450 jobs. And would you believe Shepparton finished up with 600 jobs. The community were placed in a situation where they didn't want to lose their kids to leave that community. And they didn't want their town to dissipate and make everybody throughout not only Victoria but all of Australia think that these people weren't worthy of making a resurrection within that community. And they did. At this particular time, we had the highest level of youth suicide in the world. Kids under 24 years of age that didn't think there was any future in not only their own community but in Australia. The moment we lose faith in the well-being of our own community and the nation, which is the greatest one in the world, we have lost everything that we possess or were ever been taught to understand. This was probably one of the most rewarding and gratifying experiences I have had in my life. To see a community that was down and out respond and finish up performing extremely well. I'm pretty fortunate in many ways. If I told you my story of life, it starts off with once upon a time. A man bought a truck. His dad was a truck driver, and one truck became two became four, and it just kept on growing. Today we have 24,000 people in 11 countries, and we pay $3.2 million a day wages from nothing as a high school dropout. I was lucky I failed at school. If I had have been a lawyer, which was what I wanted to do, the only thing I took on at school was Latin. And the words porto, patas, patat, patamus, patatus, patant finished up the business I was in. I carry, you carry, we carry. But even that I failed at school. 6 first term percent, 10 and 15. So academia wasn't going to be for me. But all of the personal experiences along the way have been the difference. Quite often we find highly academic qualifications give you what are known as paralysis by analysis. The biggest problem I have today is finding people that are outcome driven. I've spent the last 4.5 years as one of the 3 Australian representatives on the APEC Business Council. And really it is a talk fest. Can you imagine bonking all day with no satisfaction at the end? And this is what it's like. All they did was come along for a talk fest. No outcome. No matter what it is in our life, if we don't have an outcome for what we're doing, we're not going anywhere. A man that chops down a tree, he starts by getting a chip at a time till the tree falls. Maybe that's a bad subject to be talking about here. But you're in a situation where in travelling all around Australia with both Kelty and Crean, we've spoken to all of these people. The pulp mill, I think the offer on the table was to chop down one tree and plant 2. Well, in the longer term, it's got to be good for the community, it's got to be good for everyone. And I'm no advocate as a Green, I'm no advocate for chopping down trees, but simple common sense must prevail when you've got a community that's got everything going for it, like Tasmania, but money flowing in. Money, when it stops flowing in a business, is like me cutting my artery and the blood stopping flowing in my body. I die, and I have no desire to die. And you people as Tasmanians that are all proud individuals, you don't want to die. But you've got to be strong in saying, what do we have to do for our future? What are the commitments that we must make? And they are relatively simple. The power of one is the most important thing that each and every one of you have got today. Stand up and be proud of being a Tasmanian and all the things that you can do as being a member of this great community. I was lucky. I played football with a lot of Tasmanians when they came over to St Kilda in the late 50s and the early 60s. They used to call me a rumman. Now, the only place where the word rumman is used happens to be Tasmania. And the easiest way to check on whether the person has come to Tasmania or is from Tasmania is like our gentleman here in the front row that picked me up at the airport. I said, "Do you a rumman?" Well, I don't know. He said, "What's a rumman?" I said, "You're not from Tasmania." So he's going to find out. I told him the only way he's going to find out is talk to somebody that spent their life in Tasmania. I think I was involved in the first, what was the trial? What was that boat, the car trial round here, Charlie? Targa, the first Targa. I was down here for that and had a great time. And that's something that's got a lot going for it nationally. The bit that Frank started on with football down here, I said to Jim Bacon, "Jim, I'll buy the ferries and give you all the profits from them to have a team come from Tasmania and play in the AFL." That time we could have slipped it through without much trouble. But you got some terrific guys that came to St Kilda. Gypsy Lee, Ian Stewart, Darryl Baldock, great institutions in the league and in the leagues in Tasmania. Ian Drake, who was the manager at St Kilda, was out of Launceston. Phil Stevens, the horse. A hell of a bunch of guys. And they were all characters in their own right as well. I also started carting air freight to and from Launceston and King Island some 35 years ago. I owned a company called Brain and Brown. And we had, 5 DC3s, 6 Anson freighters and an Argosy. We bought the first flying box from London, and that ran between Melbourne and Essendon. The biggest problem, it never made any money, and all the pilots thought they were playing the air adventures of Biggles. But you've got it. You're the ones that can do so much. You are a big family. When you look at the numbers and the impact of the negative side, which you've got to stop, I think there's 160,000 odd workers in Tasmania. Now, you lose 30% of unemployment. You've then got 100,000 jobs without the impact of what's going to happen from the other closures. You just can't let that happen. The value of your houses today, have had a great escalation over the last 5 years, will lose all of that escalation if you fall into a 30% unemployment factor in Tasmania. So just for your own goodwill, just for that little nest egg called your home, you've got to protect it and fight for it, not be passive. You've got to aggressively take it by the shoulders and shake the hell out of it. But you're the ones that can do it. It's your backyard, it's your game. But you've got support. Crean has pulled a lot of money out of the federal government to support Tasmania and is passionate about it. Kelty, who ran the trade union, is on my board. I think so much of Kelty that he is the executor of my estate. And you don't give somebody a job like that lightly. But they have been down here 7 times, working with all of the communities from the north to the south. and they actually love the place. They've got to clear a lot of, Simon's got to clear a lot of work and support to pull things off in Canberra, but he's doing that. And you people have got to embrace anybody that wants to join your Tasmanian team. I've come with them, and I can assure you, I don't really need an extra fee today. I come down because I think it's in the interests of our nation, and I think you're the ones that can make it happen, or you can sit back on your butts and just watch your kids dissipate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for those very astute words. I think my takeaway from that is that economics is very important, but if you're thinking about community spirit and community ownership, you can't ignore the social and environmental impacts as well. And it's a three-legged stool. It's not a one-legged or two-legged stool, it's a three-legged stool. Without any of one, you can't have the other two. We must remember that. I'll now ask you to eat your main courses and invite Lindsay and Frank up to the table after that to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.